welcome back. We begin our proper conversation, in a manner of speaking, this morning by first of all touching on the topic of the planned referendum. I say planned because there is an effort, first of all, to be able to garner an amount of signatures that would trigger this particular activity. That being said, we have with us in studio this morning Pastor Lance Lewis. He is a representative of the National Evangelical Association of Belize. Good morning, Pastor Lewis.
Good morning, Pastor Lewis.
We also have joining us virtually this morning is Bishop Philip Wright from the Anglican Diocese of Belize. Good morning, Bishop Wright.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, April and Isani. Good to be with you this morning.
It's our pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
As we mentioned earlier, we want this to be a spirited conversation in terms of being able to address as many of the issues and concerns surrounding the cannabis legislation, right? What I want first to be able to establish first and foremost is the position of the churches on this particular matter. It is quite a controversial one in the sense that there is the political aspect which leads to the legislation that we're discussing. There is the religious aspect of it, and of course there is the overall social perspective where you have people who consume cannabis and they too have their own view of what should be taking place. Let's begin first of all by getting the church's position. You, Pastor Lance, on the part of NIAB, and then Bishop Wright on the part of the Anglican Diocese.
Well, this has been an ongoing topic discussion, but it interestingly warmed up just as we are approaching Easter. The passing of the legislation to allow for use of cannabis for recreational and also for medicinal purposes was passed in the House and in the Senate recently, although there was like 6 and 4 against and 3 abstentions. It was decided to give, the Senator Courtney decided to give a longer period to discuss it, but it was passed. I think the reason is that with some abstentions and with a bit of a uncertainty as to where the nation stood, they decided to give a little more time. The churches, National Evangelical Association Belize, Council of Churches, and other groups have been showing interest in having a referendum. The Minister Musa was saying that he doesn't see the reason for a referendum because it's like a political thing. You have the United Democratic Party and the People's United Party, and they have the numbers, so, and they're not in disagreement in terms of marijuana use. And so a referendum would be costly and unnecessary at this time. But I think it is a vital thing to do because it will test where the churches stand. Of course, interestingly, there are censuses that have come out on Belize. I can remember the 2001, and it showed so many people that were not going to church. And then in the 2010 one, there were more people not going to church than the 2001. Now, with other things coming into the picture, you see, in a sense, a listing of church. You can also see that some churches have lost members over the years and some have gained. It's like a church swap. But now the test comes, and we feel that it is a test. So although the government is saying that no, we don't think it's necessary, we feel it is necessary to get the pulse of the people. And therefore, a referendum would be the right move to make at this point in time. We're not sure what the outcome will be. We are inclined and have faith to believe that the numbers of the voters, there is about 186,000 persons that can vote. So we would need about 19,000 persons to actually vote in this referendum and actually saying no for this to be triggering off a referendum. There has been a push in this past week to get the people to vote. I did some at my church yesterday in Belize City, And there are several churches around the country that did. We don't know the numbers as yet, and we don't know if everybody is in it. What I found very interesting is that some schools have been told to not be involved in it. It seems to be government schools. Now, that is rather interesting. Why do I say that? Over the years, we used to see schools with placards, say no to drugs. What is it now? Is it being pushed to say yes to drugs? So it brings us to a situation of we are confusing the minds of children and youths, and they're at one time saying no to drugs. I don't know many schools have done that drug campaign this year. Of course, there was a pandemic this year and last year. But no, after these years of saying no to drugs, you're going to now exclude one, and then later on you exclude another one. I say just keep it that way. Say no, 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 no to drugs. And therefore, the referendum will sort of help us to see where things are, and it will test the impact of the church and the society.
Can I raise one interjection before we go to Bishop Wright on the matter? Can it be seen that perhaps an abstention from being able to have the schools weigh in on this subject at the point in time does not necessarily mean that they're saying yes or no? They're simply just removing themselves from the conversation.
Is it the schools that said it or the government that said the schools should not take part?
Well, I wouldn't know at this point. I certainly wouldn't know.
I won't say 100%, but I feel it would not be the schools, because if the schools were having a campaign over the years, say no to drugs, why would they not want to go through with a referendum? So it must be the other side.
Is the referendum more of the, not to just stop the legislation from going through, but perhaps to go back and look at it, or there's just a full-blown, no, we don't want it to go through at all?
From our point, we
Yes,
don't want
from
it to go through at all.
At all.
Period.
Period.
At least the NEAB.
Okay.
And I would say several persons in the Council of Churches and other stakeholders. And of course, there's the National Trade Union Congress. They are for the referendum. Now, I don't know if they are saying no. I know the opposition is saying no to it right now, not no to the issue of marijuana bill, but no, but need for a referendum. They are saying yes to a referendum.
Right.
Right.
Well, go ahead.
Sorry. No, I wanted to get Bishop Wright's weigh in at this point in time on behalf of the Council of Churches.
Yes, thank you, and greetings to my brother, Pastor Lance. I didn't acknowledge him earlier. I think, Isani, at the start, and correct me if I'm wrong, you mentioned that this issue is being played out in the religious realm, in the political realm, and in the social realm, if I'm right?
Yes,
Yes.
correct.
And all three realms that you mentioned concern our people, the lives of our people, whether religiously speaking, politically speaking, and so on. From the Council of Churches perspective, this issue indeed affects the lives of our people. And we are yet to know exactly the extent of that impact. Our position is, why now? And we join the voices for referendum, and we add a little thing to it that, in addition to just having a referendum, there may need to be a period still in which there is some educational process and discussion, lively discussion, public forum, to fully understand what this issue is all about. And why do we say that? I read the document myself. I have some questions still. Recently, we are hearing more about the potential financial impact, corresponding banks and all those things. It seems as though there is still more information to be had, to be understood, even as we go to a referendum, so that our people can make a more informed decision. In terms of the Council of Churches as an absolute no or not now, I think the truth be told, there's not a unanimous position, as it were, in terms of an absolute no. and there is a stronger position for why now and not now. And I think the council also lives with the possibility, and we have to, whenever you put out a referendum, the outcome may not be what you want.
Right.
We may be surprised to discover that more Belizeans are okay with this. And so we also put ourselves in a position where, okay, what if that is the case? How do we move forward? But at this point, we believe we can benefit, we can all benefit as a people, as a nation, by learning more about this bill and the potential consequences, good and bad. It has to be a fair discussion, pros and cons. And in addition to that, why not take it to the people and hear the voice of the people on a matter that is going to affect their lives for a very long time?
I have to I have to agree with you on that part, and regardless of the outcome, everybody has to respect that that notion. I want to come back to you, Pastor Lewis, in the conversation we were having about saying no to drugs and the campaign, with this, not just with the schools, but I think, as a society, we sing that. But regardless of saying no to drugs or just having that campaign in mind, we do have the legality of nicotine, tobacco, alcohol, and of course prescription drugs like steroids, right? So when we talk about the marijuana in a medicinal sense, what would then be your thoughts about that particular aspect?
Okay. I don't think enough research has been done in Belize about the medicinal use.
Okay.
I don't hear the Minister of Health involved in this. In fact, I don't even hear the Agricultural Minister involved in the marijuana thing, which marijuana is a plant. I don't know if it's agriculture or it's just looked at as a drug. But I think that they should be involved. So from a medicinal point of view, we have not really heard anything serious in black and white. So this is what it will do for you medicinally if you use it topically or ingest it in a tablet or capsule. We don't know about that. We just know about the effects when you smoke it and so on. But the medicinal part, no, I can't say much about that because I don't really know, and I have not been told. We have not been hearing that avenue. So it's something to listen to or hear more about.
So then the minister's call for an education campaign would be something that we could work with when it comes to
yeah, we'll always be open to listening to medicinal points. Of course, it's interesting when you watch television at the night, especially American television. Nearly every week you see a new drug. But then when you read, when it goes on, it says, do not take it if you're suffering from X, Y, and Z. So I find that,
every medicine has
side
its
effects, and,
yes.
and can be dangerous for you,
Right.
and can even kill you. So we don't know all the details about marijuana at this time, but it's an avenue that should be explored.
Can I challenge you to say that perhaps indeed there has been sufficient research done on cannabis use? When you look at some of the journals that have been published, it speaks to the medicinal use of cannabis, particularly marijuana, to deal with certain ailments. Arthritis, vision, all these other ailments or these conditions.
Yeah.
There has been sufficient research that says, okay, in some quarters, this is prescribed as something that you can use to treat those conditions.
Are this information being put public to the people in Belize?
Well, that goes back to what April is saying, that perhaps there is the need for an education campaign to be able to sensitize the public, whereas that is concerned.
Yes, I would say, fine, do the work presented to the people from the medicinal point of view. But from the smoking of the marijuana, I have never smoked it. I have had it smoked in volumes in front of me, especially when I was in Jamaica, witnessing this was in the 70s, and I had to talk to various groups of persons, and I can clearly remember an incident where 5 of the guys were around, and they were not just using the regular thing, they were using chillum pipes. They were against my point of view about Jesus Christ being Lord and Savior, and the only way to be saved is to come to a knowledge of Jesus Christ, which is what we should be talking about, especially this week. But I had to endure all that for the sake of the gospel. But eventually they left and said, well, this man not listening to us. I am listening to them, but of course, they were not listening to me. But I was telling them about Christ as the only hope, not smoke.
Has that been the same experiences that you've been witnessing here in Belize over the past few years?
Well, I would have to go back to Orange Walk. I lived in Orange Walk for 4 years. And in Orange Walk, well, it was called Rambo Town. And there are a lot of incidents. There's a lot of cultivation of marijuana. And there's some serious incidents that happened. I mean, I have people came to Belize in the 70s, early 80s, coming out of the problems in Central America. So there were Salvadorians, there were Honduranians, there were different nations coming in, Nicaraguans and so on. And it would appear from my perspective that the men were involved in marijuana cultivation and the women were involved with other things which brought profit to some people. But it was very sad because I saw the effects of people being shot and killed because of this. And I can even recall one night at 10 o'clock in the night hearing gunfire, and I turned to my wife and said, that is automatic fire. It was right near to where we were. It turned out to be that the top drug man in Orange Walk was shot and killed right at his gate, coming out of his motor vehicle at night. I've also seen where people who were involved in business, regular good business, agricultural business and so on, gravitated towards marijuana. I didn't know this. And the one that I knew very well ended up dead. His death was the most disturbing thing I have seen. I can remember another friend of mine who I spoke to Saturday around midday and invited him to church, and he said one day he will come. And he got killed because he was driving a car that his father had used, and that was involved in drugs. But it was not the father driving this time, it was the son. Coming to a roadblock, he turned around and BF or police shot him and he died, and it was terrible. But I've seen terrible deaths. I've actually witnessed funerals where you had to put on masks even though there was no COVID because of the deterioration of the body. So Orange Walk, I've also seen where helicopters, and I still have those pictures, helicopters came into Belize to spray the fields. Now that had an effect on the marijuana plants, but also on the bee population. And it affected the bee population in Orange Walk for quite a while. So Orange Walk was serious. There were people in different departments who preferred to lose their jobs and stay in Orange Walk because it was more lucrative. I have actually seen a crashed plane, didn't realize it until I reached close, and then I realized, boy, this could explode, and I had to turn back. This is on a feeder road outside of Orange Walk. So I've seen it, and the effects.
Perhaps we're gearing towards more of a progressive society where we're able to kind of to tenor that a little bit. I'm not saying that the violence would stop or anything like that, because I have no idea what the outcome would actually be when it comes to if this legislation passes, right? I would more hope that it would be about monitoring than anything else, and that is where I feel the referendum would kind of help a little bit to keep the government on its feet, so that we can feel better as a society if this comes to pass. Bishop Wright, what is the Anglican Diocese of Belize's take on the idea of the medicinal traits of the cannabis?
Well, maybe I preface my answer by saying, sometimes as you listen to the conversations, as with many conversations, to be honest, you will have the absolute no's and you will have the absolute yes, almost
And you have the moderates.
And in the middle, actually, yes, you're right. In the middle, I think you may have a larger than realized population that really wants to know more. They haven't really decided on a yes or no. They just want to know more so that they can make a more informed decision. And I think that group also has to be catered for and attended to. And that is where the public discourse and the information or educational campaign and even the referendum can come in, sort of catering for those in the middle, as we like to say. Specific to the medicinal values of cannabis, I think we are prepared to acknowledge that, yes, science has indeed indicated through some research and other things. I think it's going on in places like Jamaica, where they are continuing, and they've seen benefits for many ailments. But specific to the bill and with respect to that, I don't know. Perhaps the best section of the bill, from what I could see, is the section that has to do with processing license, where license would be given to those who, and I'll read it here, every person who desires to process cannabis or for cannabis edibles, suppose it will show up in fudge and tableta, right? Cannabis extracts, cannabis oils, or any other prescribed purpose shall apply. Now, all we are saying is, fine, that is there, but what does that mean as you flesh it out? You see what I'm saying? Who gets to approach and say, I have the scientific background, I have the know-how to process this thing in a manner that is not going to be ultimately destructive. And all we are saying at this point, at least from our perspective, is there are still a lot of questions. And where there are questions, I think they deserve an answer. And it is in getting that answer, people hopefully would be in a better position to decide. But these are some of the things we still see when we look at the bill itself.
Now, let's look at it from an equally practical point of view. You've mentioned, Pastor Lewis, Orange Walk in the 70s.
70s, 80s.
70s, 80s, and the shape that took, so to speak. But it's no different than our realities today, where if you look at an urban environment like Belize City, a lot of what takes place in terms of the gang warfare is based on the marijuana situation. And I say situation because of sales, because of turf, because of everything that surrounds it. So the marijuana situation is what perhaps fuels a lot of the ongoing crime and violence in Belize. Now that, if you look at it from that point of view, hasn't changed over the years. As a matter of fact, it has progressively gotten worse if that were the case. So I think what the government of the day is seeking to do is to try to create an industry where, as it says, there will be equity so that persons who are interested in legally being able to do business would be able to do so without having to worry about, you know, the illegalities and the illicit nature of doing business under the table. Would you agree with that fundamentally, or is that where you philosophically part ways with what the government is trying to put forward?
I still am on the point of view that the promotion by government of marijuana use legally across the board is not a wise thing to do. You are saying Belize City would be like Orange Walk with all the things. Well, no, there's ganja and guns, not guns and roses. And so there is that part of it, the guns go with it. Now, if you follow what the government is doing, I'm not sure it will take away the guns and the crime, because people will still want to gain more. And since some of this marijuana is coming from outside, it will come with other things with it. So I think it's a dangerous path we are on. I would not go so far against the medicinal part of it, but certainly the use of it recreationally, and especially leaving it open 10 grams no more than that will come into the picture. You're going to destroy our youths, because it's a fact that the male brain is affected by the THC in the marijuana more than the female, and that will create more problems for our youths. And I am a stickler against that. Why? No, let's go now. Let's go back a little bit. You see what is happening now? We are being exposed to all different viewpoints, which is good, but a pressure is coming to let you decide to drop your stance on it. That same thing happened in the LGBT scenario. It was a no, boom, full stop. And then slowly you start to see a difference in the minds of people, and acceptation and people pushing. And then, of course, 2013, the government ruled in favor of this. The judge ruled in favor of this. Now, the similar thing can happen. And I need to even go back further to look at alcohol. I wasn't around when alcohol was legalized, but I see the serious dangers of it. So I don't know what was happening in the minds of the people when they decided to legalize alcohol, but I see the tremendous damage that it has caused. I don't think there's enough evidence to be able to prove that marijuana caused accidents on the road, but if it is a drug, it could impair your ability to move up and down. So that is still an area that we have not touched on. But I am still saying that whereas I might concede to medicinal marijuana, I am not conceding at this point, and I stay strong on certain things, carry it with me from point A right through. The use of it recreationally, I don't see the point, and I see it will give more danger and more damage to our children. When when bring it into fudge, it's a gateway drug. So you will get used to this, and then you want something else. There is a story about an American young man whose father was a dentist. He's an Asian, and he wanted to do the same thing. He went to a university in the States to do dentistry, ended up starting out with marijuana, and then gravitated towards other drugs, and eventually became a person who was selling drugs and ended up in prison. Thank God that he got saved in prison when some guys were singing and praying and witnessing, and he got saved, and he's now a champion for the cause of Christ. But he started out on a very, very low base of a small drug like marijuana, and then he gravitated upward, and then he found himself totally lost and in prison, transferring from prison to prison.
And I would imagine that that situation is people have examples of that, daily, different individuals that go through that. But let me bring it to a more wider population, with countries that have this cannabis legalized, where you are not necessarily seeing the downfall of a society because of cannabis. Where I always go back to certain areas. We always talk about like Amsterdam, where everybody, but it's actually legal in the entire country. And you're not
legal in Holland.
Yes, in the entire country of the Netherlands. And you're not seeing that irresponsible use from the population. If you see irresponsible use, it's probably from the tourists that come in because, it's not legal in their country. And they come in and they kind of go wild, right? But that excessive use and that irresponsibility is not seen statistically in countries that have it legal. When we talk about sensitive matters like this, it's easier to pin it on individual cases or somebody we know, because it's personal. I really have no idea. My biggest concern is how the government is going to monitor if it comes to recreational use. That is what I want to know.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Well, I think sometimes too, and this is again more of my personal, but I think we also have to be careful when we look at other countries we have to be careful we're not comparing apples to oranges as well. Given the infrastructure of these countries, the resources and so on. We have to take into account, I think, some of the other factors that might be enabling them to keep this thing under control, or who knows, the cultural stuff, the attitude of the people and so on. I'm not putting down my own people. I'm just saying there needs to be some caution as well when we make the comparisons. Even to the United States, we may say, look, they have, but I don't see a level playing field there when it comes to us. And to the point you make, Isani, about the groups, you know, those mostly, I don't know if it's mostly, but the population, the segment of the population that have fallen on the sort of negative side of the current reality, right? Whether it's in incarceration or whatever. Now, again, I will go back to the bill because I did my little reading there, but I suppose the group that is going to be targeted, that group, will be largely those who will be looking for the cannabis program identification card, right? That allows you to have your 2 plants and your less than 28 grams or something like that. But as I read that, listen to what it says could happen to such persons. So if they contravene the law, no? The law. It says they could be fined $1,000 and a fine of $5,000 for any subsequent offense if they violate the conditions of the identification card. Now, the bill doesn't say what happens to them if they can't pay the money. But I'm also wondering, so what if that small operator who violates cannot pay the fine? Does that put them in any better position? Ultimately, the bill is clear not to put anybody in prison, I noticed. It just say you will have your license revoked. And then you have to ask the question, if you no longer license all that investment in plants and so on, I don't know if they're just going to burn them or what. But my simple point this morning is there are questions, there are still uncertainties connected with this thing. And anybody, I think, who is thinking through would say, you know what, I'm still not comfortable. I still have too many unanswered questions. I do, certainly, having read the bill in its current form. And I think that is the main message here as well, if you see where I'm getting at.
Let's go back a bit to the idea of being able to trigger a referendum to get the voting population to have a say on where they stand on the matter. To me, it's as if though the religious community is racing against time, considering the window of opportunity for you guys to be able to garner the 18,000 plus signatures. How quickly would you be able to get an understanding of where you are numerically? Because the deadline, so to speak, is quickly approaching.
When is it? When is the deadline?
I'm not quite certain, I believe. Go ahead, Bishop.
I think we're maybe a week away from the deadline.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so you have a week remaining to see
during
if you'll be
Holy
able
Week.
to,
during holiday.
to get the 18,000 signatures that would be necessary for this to trigger the referendum. How quickly would you guys be able to get a tally as to where you are?
I think by Wednesday. I think there's a number collected. I couldn't quite get the exact amount, but I don't think we had reached that 18,000 level up to last night. But there are still, persons coming in with their boxes or with boxes of papers across the country. So I think I would want to go to say Wednesday, because after that things go a different direction. The schools are closed, so that is a closed, even if it's a private school, it closed that opportunity with the closure of schools, which was a very short window of opportunity. And so, to me, Wednesday is where the cutoff would be. After that, it's going to be hard.
Yeah.
So by that time, I think we should have an idea for the referendum.
This gained
numbers.
traction fairly quickly.
Yes.
Yeah.
I say that in the sense that from a news reporting standpoint, put on my hat as a journalist at this point,
Yes.
right? When I saw that NIA began putting out its releases, when I saw the Catholic Church put out a video statement, when I saw all of these parts begin to move, I'm thinking, okay, well, it's primarily the church that is moving towards, you know, furthering its agenda. But then I noticed that the political party that's in opposition
Also.
has latched on to it. I also noticed that the trade unions, the umbrella organization for the trade unions in Belize, has also latched on to the idea that perhaps a referendum is in fact the way to go to be able to see exactly where the populace stands on the matter.
Yes.
What do you say about that? Is it that, you know, everyone has a vested interest that they're pushing forward, either be it from a trade union perspective, being it from a political perspective, or a religious one?
Everybody has their own way of going for it. But I think the referendum as a whole, for us to have it to be good, for the church point of view, it's a good test to see what is happening. Because if we are preaching, quote unquote, a no to marijuana to our people, and then when the referendum comes out, it says something else, then we see that we're falling short. We're losing the battle. Now, it's Easter now, so it will be a good time to pray. We're not at the same level as we were pandemically speaking, but we are in another issue at Easter time. We're also not on the same page with the LGBT issue a few years ago, but it's another issue. This time around, it is more bringing the churches together than the LGBT thing did. But the bottom line is the numbers. Will we get the 19,000? We hope and we believe and we are trusting that we will get it. Now, if the government can decide not to pay any attention to it, that has happened, you know, in other cases of referendum in this country. So that's another issue. But at least let us try to make sure that we have done our work and we have gotten the over 19,000. That is our, sorry.
How does the church set out to fight a culture, though? I say that because marijuana use, promotion is very pervasive. Like if we listen to the kind of music that we listen to in our part of the world, Caribbean, if we listen to reggae, if we listen to dancehall, hip-hop, their references to marijuana usage abound. When you look at young people who are not working, not gainfully employed, when you ask them, okay, what do you do to make a quick buck? The first thing they'll tell you, buy a gawali, you know, stash, and I could flip that and make more money. That's part of our culture. It becomes sort of like an identity to some people. How does the church now go against such a thing where that is very much ingrained in our society at this point?
Well,
Sorry, go ahead, Bishop Wright.
Well, I don't know if I would use the word against as much as you make your point. Now, Christianity is, if I may quickly say this, is obviously one of those faiths that is built on a belief that we have a free choice. You know, from the beginning, we had a free choice. People will make their choices. I think we accept that. But every now and again, I think there needs to be an awareness of the consequences of the choices. So this thing about religion and culture has been as old as religion and culture have been around. Sometimes you win the culture war, sometimes you lose. But at the end of the day, I think the thing to hold up to everybody is, what will this do to us as a people? Just to ask that question and to have people think about it. So whether you choose to use the substance or not, are you cognizant of the possible impact? and effect on your family, on you, and everything is. The same thing with alcohol, the same thing with tobacco. We may have gone down that road already, but we are still saying to people, they are legal, tobacco and alcohol, but we still say to people, watch your health, watch the consequences, be careful. And so we are here at a point where before we go legal, before we take that step again, like we did with alcohol and tobacco, let's pause. Let's talk more about this thing. Let's have a better understanding of what we're getting into. And in terms of the referendum and timing, maybe behind all of this from the churches is a cry for further delay. Given the somewhat unrealistic time frame we've been given, maybe the ultimate call here is, why not slow down? Why not pause? And finally, I want to say to those other groups that might be shouting for referendum, I want to think, like us, their motives are good. They're thinking about the people, the population. But I'll also admit that I'm sure that some of these groups are not as concerned about some of the social impact that the church might, and they might be thinking more in terms of finance and economics, you know. But the point is, at the end of the day, whether for the social impact or the economic or financial, it's still the lives of our people that will be affected. And I think we need to be clear as to what that means.
So following through, what would happen after, right? So let's say you get the 19,000 votes and they're in the favor of looking at the legislation again, right? What would the stance on the church be then?
The church stance will still be say no to drugs. The church stance will say, look at what alcohol has done, look at what tobacco has done. We see the potential danger of marijuana. So let's just keep saying no. We have to keep the high ground. We have to keep the high ground, and that's what we want to maintain. Now, if there is a change in terms of a referendum or the government going ahead with what they wanted to do, then the church still has to preach the gospel, turn people to Christ, because whether they use marijuana or not, it is your relationship to Jesus Christ that matters, and that will ultimately decide where you go at the end of the road. So the pastors and leaders of this nation need to preach the gospel, because it seems to be a lack of that in our city and in our towns and villages that has caused people to find other alternatives, which is another downward road, which would lead them away from the pearly gates.
And I'll have to join my brother in that,
Sure.
in the sense that we accept we live in a democracy, right? And these are the democratic processes that have been afforded to us, whether it's, you know, an election or referendum. And in a democracy, we have to accept the results. We see the sad results when you find it hard to accept results, right? But having said that, I know in my circles, we often remind each other the church is not a democracy, however. We don't sit around and by popular vote decide what is sin or not is not a sin. We could be in big trouble. So I join Pastor Lance, Lewis, in saying that we will respect whatever outcome that comes, let's say, at the end of a referendum, but we'll have to continue to admonish our people and to encourage our people to make decisions that are in their best interest. And not just to follow the crowd or even follow the majority, because that's what the church has always done from its inception, you know.
Any final words on your part, Pastor Lance?
I think we are at a very crucial stage. I saw that we went a step down with the LGBT, and I think we'll go a step down with this you know, free-for-all marijuana issue, especially our young people. And therefore, I say it's a tremendous time to pray and to seek God's face on behalf of the nation, and to preach the gospel. For there is no other name under heaven given among men whereby we must be saved. And we have to preach the gospel and tell people that unless a man is born again, he cannot enter the kingdom of God. So that is the message that will clear up all the other things. It's not so much the message of cannabis or other things. It is your relationship to Jesus Christ. And so let's see ourselves in another situation as we were 2 years ago. We have a very serious thing on our hand. So let's ask the people of God to spend time in prayer and worship and to seek God's face on behalf of the nation. So if the time is extended, fine, but I would want it to be extended for the schools, when the schools go and people go back to school. But for the people here, I think that the movement is strong right now. So let's go for it and give up to Wednesday. That's my opinion. But leave the door open for the schools to be able to come back and get that done on their part. So to me, whether it's a yes or no, it is an indictment on the church, and it's a reminder of the church to stick to the message that Jesus Christ alone is Savior and Lord. And that's what we have to preach.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. And
may I quickly,
Rod,
I have to take advantage of the opportunity to remind us all it is Holy Week, by the way.
Yes, indeed.
And, and not only that, though, but let's bear in mind that towards the close of this week, an innocent man, we are recalling where an innocent man was brought to trial. And you know what the popular vote was?
Crucify.
Free the robber, free the murderer,
Crucify.
and crucify the innocent man. I just want to leave that with us, that the popularity vote, the larger crowd, the bigger voice, is not always the right voice. And it's not always the voice of justice. So let's reflect on these things, I think, this week, especially as we journey with our Lord to the cross and watch our innocent victim killed.
all right, well, once again, thanks, gentlemen, and best of luck with your endeavor in garnering the requisite number of signatures. That being said, we now go to our second commercial break. When we return, it's to have a discussion with a pair of athletes who are doing big things in the United States. Stay tuned.